to become free from suffering in this lifetime is simple words, but even these simple words can seem like high aspirations when you are working very, very hard with a family to support, or your own self even to support, with basic requirements, in a repetition of work, rest, a little play, then more work, rest, and this continuation we call samsara in the Pali language, and very well described as the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel being this wheel for the little hamster to run and run and run and run and get nowhere. I remember first really realizing what my life had become when sitting in the forest in a monastery not far from here, actually in a moment of despair. At that point in time, I felt I was suffering. I'd come to stay in a monastery thousands of miles away from home with a view to ordaining and becoming a monk. And this is some time ago now. And, well, it wasn't all it cracked up to be. It seemed at that time. It seemed like really hard work. You got up very early, you had to run around cleaning, doing things, endless tasks, which seemed to also be then repeated again the next day, and again, and so on, with no play, no rest, it seemed. And I sat thinking, well, this isn't for me. I don't even get time to meditate. Not like when I was at home, in my flat that I had then, when I could simply shut the door behind me and practice. But I still had to work and pay rent, bills. You have to run a vehicle. You know, I was still on the hamster wheel. And I sat in this moment of despair thinking, well, that doesn't seem very good. This doesn't seem very good. What do I do? And this was the question the Buddha addressed. Because whether you are in lay life or whether you are living in a monastery, then you are pretty much in the same situation with your body and your thinking mind, and you may not know it, but your mind or your capacity of knowing the situation you are in, that we call the citta. So I sat watching these ants going for some distance in a very neat line, quite a long, long, long way, disappearing. And as organised as a modern day dual carriageway motorway, coming back the other way was the other row of ants. And they didn't seem to be carrying much or achieving much, but many, many ants going this way and going back that way. And this continued all day until night time, and they all seemed to disappear. And the next day they were there again, doing the same thing. And I thought, well, really, what are their options? Are we the same? Are we like these ants? I feel like one of these ants. I thought if I go home, I have to be one of these ants. I have to get in my car, drive along the dual carriageway or the motorway, go to work, and then in the evening, come back. And if I'm lucky and not stuck in a traffic jam for hours on end, unlike the ants who seem to be moving more freely, I may have some time to sit and meditate. Or I stay here and I get up and I clean and then I wash bowls and things. Then I help with the monks going on alms round. And then I quickly eat my meal so that I'm finished that in time to clean up after the meal time. More cleaning. And then maybe some time for meditation. When frankly you're so exhausted you just go to sleep in the heat and all the work you've been doing since 4 o'clock in the morning. Not to mention morning puja, chanting, which you're learning. And I had this toing and froing. I'm trying to decide between the better of two evils, it seemed. And looking at the ants, I thought, look, you ants, all you've got to do, just one of you, is just step out of this line and go your own way. You'll have a whale of a time in the forest. There's plenty of food. After all, you're spending all day long taking this little piece of food all that way to feed the queen of ants or whatever it is you're doing, the family, only to have to return and keep doing this with many, many other ants doing the same as you. And just by stepping a little way from the flow of things, you can go your own way and be a solitary ant. Who knows, maybe another ant might come with you and keep you company. Or maybe not. Anyway, ants don't have this capacity to make these decisions. But in the realm of beings in this samsara, us humans, we do. So what did I do? I kind of escaped really. I got to the end of the time I'd set to be there and went down into the local town, not far from here, and got myself a little place to rent. And I thought, well, this is ideal. This is somewhere in between. I'm not in the monastery and I'm not going home. And I had enough money, just about enough money, to keep going for a little while. And I thought, you know, if it doesn't work out, I could always try and earn some money through my old ways, trading in financial things and doing something like that, which I can do more or less anywhere. So maybe this could be an option. Now, after I'd had a meal in the morning and tried to practice meditation, but with all of the options out there to me, the beach, some more to eat, a coffee, a Coca-Cola, maybe something lunchtime somewhere nice, maybe a trip across to the island in the afternoon, maybe go and see this, maybe go and see that, or maybe go and look at another monastery. I didn't get to do much meditation. And soon I found myself back in this same routine of trying to satisfy my insatiable desires. And actually this became even more difficult than dealing with the routine of either my work life, which at least was a routine and structured, and I knew when I had time to practice, or in the monastery, where similarly, at least I knew I did have time to practice, and there was an end goal. There was an aim towards being able to ordain one day and really devote my life of practice to becoming free from suffering in this lifetime. But then what is this free from suffering in this lifetime? I was asking myself. It certainly isn't this, trying to satisfy insatiable desires of taste and touch and all I could see and hear and experience in this beautiful country with beautiful people and beautiful places. It still wasn't quite hitting the spot. But there was something there in meditation which kept drawing me back to monasteries and had got me this far. So I returned to the monastery with some fresh enthusiasm, and this cycle went on for some time. Back to England, back to work, back to Thailand, back to the monastery. And I had to, through this experience, eventually come to a realization that it wasn't where I was. It wasn't what I was doing. It was purely me. I was bound, chained, tied to samsara, or even more so to my own slave master. I was a slave to my own kilesas, those desires rooted in greed, hatred and delusion. And whether in the monastery, or whether at home in England working, or whether on the beach in Thailand, with everything I could wish for, I was still one of those ants. So even when I stepped out of the row of ants, I was still a slave. I was not free. And I began to realize that the comfort zone was the protection that I could get from my own slave master. What do you call a slave master? I think that's what it's called. The whip man driving the slaves. The protection, only protection I could get from that vicious slave master who was whipping me constantly to try and satisfy insatiable desires. And you may not see it quite this dramatically, but I'm illustrating the point of what we are all experiencing at the moment in real life. I'm not saying that worldly life, household life, samsara, as we may refer to it, is necessarily real, any more real than living the monk's life, a monastic, a monk in a monastery. I would say that is more real, because you're away from distraction that is offered by society. You're away from all of the temptations to try and satisfy those insatiable desires continuously. And this is what was what I was able to see as the offer of protection from that slave master. An environment whereby there were so many rules and conditions that kept you within boundaries to be able to practice at every opportunity that arose. At first it seems like you've gone from the frying pan into the fire, an expression, an English expression, meaning you've escaped from some terrible situation and found yourself in something much worse. But then when you jump out of the fire and you can't get back into the frying pan, and maybe you end up in a desolate, waterless, heatless, vacuumous area of no sustenance and shrivel up and die, you are really experiencing suffering at its very worst. You've really gone into what they call nihilism. No, annihilation. You've tried to escape your suffering of life through annihilation, and this can be done in very many ways, usually via self-harm of some kind or another, drugs, alcohol, or even literal self-harm, as people do. And ultimately, people take their own lives. Suicide is the ultimate form of annihilation. Now, whether you believe in rebirth or you don't believe in rebirth, it doesn't matter. We all don't know what happens after death. So the best we can assume is there is nothing. In which case, one could say, you've got nothing to lose by whatever you do in this lifetime. But you have, because you have to live in this lifetime, where in fact rebirth is happening continuously, from moment to moment. Now this, in Buddhism, is what rebirth is. It is rebirth from one moment to the next in a seamless flow. And when the body and the thinking mind dies, it is just another moment, when there is rebirth into the next moment in a different form, a different body, a different thinking mind. Whether it be in the human realm, animal realms, heavenly realms or hell realms, this is rebirth. So, we don't know what will happen after we die, but we can, through deep states of meditation, absorption, samadhi, gain some knowledge, gain some experience, if we're fortunate enough to do so, of previous existences, previous lives. It's been known. We can read about, we can watch, we can hear about people whom have had near-death experiences. And the most common thread you'll hear from people about experiencing near-death experiences, apart from all of the lights they see and the being called towards this and that, and what can largely be put down to some mental phenomena or other, or even just wild imagination, who knows, what is most commonly mentioned is that their entire life passes before their eyes very quickly. Now, of course, this happens very quickly because you're about to die. You haven't got time to dwell. But it's very commonly experienced. And then people whom haven't died have recounted this experience. And this isn't uncommon. This is very, you'll all have heard this. Oh, my life flashed before, it's even as an expression, my life flashed before my eyes. And if you've ever had a near-death experience, and I won't go into all of those, you'll know that yes, your life kind of does flash before your eyes. Not like a replay of a movie, but literally in a flash. You're going to die, it's got to be quick. And this is very important to know, because if this is true, and I think because many, many living people have told us this is what happens, that there has to be some substance behind it. And there has to be some basis for it, a reason. Now, we cannot remember our previous lives. And we cannot also remember a huge amount of this life experience also. So when we cannot actually remember most and a it is most of this life. Can you remember being born? Can you remember learning to talk? Maybe. Or walk? Maybe. Sit for the first time? Maybe. Can you remember first learning to eat something other than milk, drinking milk? Probably not. Your first suckle at the breast, your first breath, or your first cry? Most probably not. But it all happened in this lifetime, and many, many other things subsequently. And the older you get, the more that has happened, and the more you have forgotten. So it's quite logical to assume that you would have certainly forgotten a previous life's experiences, whether they happened or not, and our minds automatically tend to blot out the bad experiences and remember the good experiences, the good old days, the nice hot summers, the nice white Christmases. And it never rained on school holidays, not in the good old days. It was always strawberries and cream and scones or scones. And those from the UK won't know what I'm talking about there, maybe, but maybe Americans. The point is, our lives are like chapters in a book. And this is a book of an infinite number of chapters. And at the point of death of this physical body and this thinking mind, this thinking brain, we simply move to the next chapter. And at this pre-death moment of recollection of this life, when your life, the whole life flashes before your eyes, you are experiencing what is a summary of your karma. Karma is just action. This is what it literally means. Actions of body, speech and mind. And why do you experience this at this point in time and not continuously? Because this is the point in time when the witness, yes, this observer, yes, this, we call it citta in the Pali word, the one, this point of view of knowing, this that knows. At this point, this citta is going into the next chapter and takes with it the karmic consequences, which become causes for rebirth, or causes for the conditions that will affect this citta in rebirth. Now, this cannot be proven as an experiential thing, because nobody's died and gone forward and come back. But many people have remembered past lives. But that can only be hearsay. It cannot be proven. But what can be proven is in this lifetime. When you move from one moment to another moment, so when I moved from watching ants in the monastery into the town or the beach area, I was experiencing a rebirth of sorts. In fact, in every breath it's a rebirth, but that's a physical move. And then back to England, back to work, the same, another move. And each time I was taking what I'd built in the previous life with me. So when I came from the monastery to the beach and the restaurants and the social life of the local area, I was bringing with me what I'd learnt in the monastery, whether I wanted to or not, and what I'd been doing in the monastery. It was coming with me whether I wanted to or not. And this was the causes for the conditions I was about to face. So even though the pizzas were wonderful, the Coca-Cola was wonderful whenever I wanted it, the coffee, the real coffee, not the instant Nescafe, in the coffee houses, the beaches, the pretty ladies, the music, was all wonderful. what I'd built in the monastery in the time I did have to practice was something far greater than that, far more satisfying than anything that one can try to satisfy with regards to sensual experiences of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching. And that is the experience of samadhi, of meditation, which previously I'd built up in a former life, if you like, whilst I'd been practicing in lay life as a working person at every opportunity I had. More opportunities than I had when I got to the monastery. But because I'd built up through the opportunities I had in lay life, causes and conditions for the next life in the monastery, even though I had fewer opportunities to meditate, it didn't matter. When I had the opportunity to meditate, I was able to and enjoy my meditation as restorative and invigorating and enjoyable as it should be, without effort, as a result of the work I'd put in that previous existence. Now, where did that motivation come from in that life, when I was an ordinary working person in a country far away from Buddhism, having never heard of Buddhism? Well, heard of Buddhism, but thinking it was some fat guy in the Chinese restaurant where I'd get my takeaways from. And not at all, of course, but this is how we used to think, how we think. A lot of people think in the West. It's a Christian section of the world. So, where did it come from? Where did that idea, that desire, wholesome desire, but where did it come from? The need to break out of samsara, from those chains, from that slave master. And the idea that this could come from meditation. Well, yes, of course, a lot of it came from reading, from listening and watching and understanding. But something had to spark the interest in the first place. There's so much you could look at on YouTube, for instance. But it's not all going to grab your interest. If I was to, let's say, watch something about, something came on about football, for instance, and nothing wrong with football, but I don't like football. It's never going to grab my interest. Doesn't matter how often it comes up on my YouTube thing, it's never going to grab my interest. And the clever people at YouTube know that, so they don't send you that stuff. They send you what's going to grab your interest from your history, of course, and also things they draw in from connected issues than things you've said or searched for or looked at. But our own subconscious awareness, if you like, is also doing that continuously and pointing us in the right direction or the wrong direction. And what is that? It is karmic consequence. It is the results of previous karma. Now, to my knowledge, as a baby, or at times when I don't remember in this lifetime, I never had any interest in meditation. I suppose, in fact, yes, I did. I had quite an interest in this kind of thing as a child. I was quite interested in a TV series called Kung Fu, which was about a Shaolin monk, basically, who'd moved to America and was in the Wild West. And another program based on Buddhism called Monkey Magic or something like that. But that's as close as it got. And even those things, not all people were interested in. Not all my school friends watched these same programs. They would have been watching something else that interested them. So we're all drawn to different areas of interests. Why? It is because of a result of our previous actions of body, speech and mind, and karma causing these consequences. So whatever happened, wherever I went, as this ant leaving the row, I gravitated back to the monastery. From my first visit to a monastery in England, where I only stayed for 3 days and couldn't wait for it to be over, and the minute I got out of the gates and got into my taxi to go to the railway station, I realised what I was going back to and wanted to return to the monastery. Not for an easier life. I had a very good life, an easy life. Not all monks have escaped from tragedy. There is a tendency to assume that someone who's gone into any religion, become a priest or become a monk, found God, born again, has suffered some dreadful tragedy. Their wives died, their child's died, they were alcoholics or drug abusers, they were raped or abused. Something must have caused them to give up on life. It's often thought, isn't it? And so, well, I can assure you, that's a very small percentage of, maybe some people do, and it's very nice that they have that option to go and recover and get better, heal. But most long-term monastics have come from an ordinary background. And it's not a background that is connected necessarily to Buddhism in terms of Buddhist monks. Usually very different backgrounds and areas of interests. But as a result of these previous lives or karmic consequence, thousands of miles away in this forest here, couldn't be further away from my wildest imagination as even an adult at the age in my 30s. But is very real now and doesn't feel at all new to me, or I don't feel alien to it. But anyway, at the point of turning to the next chapter, we recall our lives. This is like St. Peter at the pearly gates. Have you been good? Have you been bad? Have you been good? Have you been bad? Tick, 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 you get these ticks, you go into heaven. You get crosses, crosses, you go to hell. It's a bit like that in a way. Maybe that's where they got this story from. But it is a point of, what's that called? Judgment Day, yes? And you're going to then face your consequences in this rebirth. And this can happen moment to moment in life. So you go and do something bad, in the next moment you're going to face the consequences, or at least the concern of facing the consequences eventually from that moment in every moment thereafter. So all actions have a reaction. This is nature. This is also karma, but this is also a commonly understood thing throughout humanity. Cause and effect is what I was trying to look for. So we're flicking into the next chapter, and you take a lot of things with you. But why can we not step away without choosing annihilation of any description? Why can we not step away from samsara? Well, we can. But first, we have to understand that we are bound in this book, tightly like the pages into the binding. And these bindings are our chains, our ropes. We call them in Buddhism fetters. And fetters are our ties to samsara. And it's those ties we have to gradually and effectively break to become free from it. Those ties are firmly rooted in desire, primarily. Firstly, for this body and this self, this personality that we think we are, which is just purely as a result of causes and conditions. And then for all we think we desire through sensual experience, what we like, and also what we don't like. So what we desire to have and what we desire not to have. And this is the basis of greed, hatred, and delusion. Delusion being the confusion we have, the ignorance we have to not understand that by just trying to quench an unquenchable thirst, to satisfy an insatiable desire, is just causing us to have to repeat and repeat and repeat the exercise over and over again of going to work, earning the money to buy the things we think we need, the things we want, only to use them up, to be unsatisfied, to go to work, to earn the money to buy more things we think we want, only to use them up, to be unsatisfied, to go to work, to earn the money to buy the things we want, over and over and again. And this is similarly the way rebirth works, this cycle. When we realize, through enlightenment, awakening, realization, whatever you call it, in this light bulb moment, but this is not where we find contentment. Contentment is in simplicity, in renunciation, in understanding that this physical body is just elements, solid elements, liquid elements, gas, wind elements, heat, fire, temperature elements. And then with ignorance, not knowing, there is also very much this spacious space element, the fifth element, and the sixth element of consciousness, conscious awareness, which isn't in the thinking brain, it isn't in this body, it isn't in this bag of skin and bones. It abides in space, which is in this bag of skin and bones just as much as it's in this wooden post or in these wooden floorboards. Space is everywhere. In every atom there is more space than solid matter. We are just a part of solidity, liquidity, gaseousness, temperature, moving around in space, with space integral to our makeup. But our conscious awareness is only bound to this physical body by desire, by the notion that this is us, when it isn't us. What is us is the observer, the witness, that knows, in spaciousness. So to call it our pet name in Pali, Citta, our conscious awareness in infinite spaciousness all around, isn't going to die when this body dies, but it will go to the next chapter. If it still thinks its purpose is, and it will think as a result of karma, actions of body, speech and mind, and it will think then from the conditions caused by that karma in this rebirth, it will take comfort in finding a new physical vehicle, whether it be in the human realm, animal realms, hell realms, or heavenly realms. It doesn't matter. It's still all samsara. In fact, there are many more realms, but we won't go into all of that Buddhist cosmology stuff. So we're reborn. It's rebirth. It's not reincarnation. That's the same person being reborn. This isn't that. You're not the same person. It's just that knows. And if you end up spending your life as a monk, it's probably because you had interest in becoming a monk in a previous life. And if you don't attain to enlightenment, if you don't achieve Nibbāna, there's a very strong possibility in your next birth you will be a monk for a lot longer of that next lifetime, because of causes and conditions you put in place. There are personalities, other people, other Cittas, if you like, whom are bound to us throughout this infinite, remember, I said, infinite number of rebirths. So by the very nature of the unquantifiable number of infinity, no beginning and there is no end, we do bump across other people in this lifetime and future lifetimes and past lifetimes, time and time again. Your dog may have been your father your father may have been your cat. All of these weird and wonderful combinations. Any of them, in terms of numbers of infinity, have happened, can have happened, will have happened. By the nature of an infinite, unquantifiable number, there are an infinite, unquantifiable number of possibilities and combinations. So, even in this one existence, we can see from our own experience that there are things we like, things we don't like, and things we gravitate towards and things we gravitate away from. We have attractions towards one thing and aversions towards another. How do we break these ties gradually down? Is we identify that liking. We see it as it arises. We see desire as it arises. And we don't suppress it, we understand it. And we make inroads towards reducing it by counteracting it with its counterparts. So when we have lust, strong desire for something, we look at the downside of that thing. Oh, I didn't put the light on. I'll put the light on. I'm sorry if the whole video was dark, but I've come into the light to the end. True enlightenment, eh? But we see gradually through this practice of keeping moral virtue, meditation, and this development of wisdom, we can see that it isn't worth trying to satisfy these unsatisfiable desires, and that we must find contentment in what we can find contentment in. And that is to really experience and know this citta, this conscious awareness, in spaciousness, as slightly separate, slightly separated, a little distance between what you consider to be yourself. So therefore it is not yourself. It is the witness to simply these four physical elements and the fifth element of space in which they float around in, as are all other beings and all inanimate objects, just made up of elements, which are continually changing, continually breaking down, eroding. This we call entropy. It doesn't matter how long, in an infinite amount of time, we can have universes coming, universes going, big bangs and big whatever implosions to black holes. It doesn't matter. There's no beginning, there's no end, that we know. But what this citta can do, when it understands that you are not this self, and that all things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of your control, when it's got this full awareness of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha's teachings, the basic simplicity of the Buddha's teachings and the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. And it no longer thinks that hoping and praying to a higher power will result in what you think you desire, either heaven or hell. Because after all, in Buddhism, heaven and hell are still samsara. This isn't breaking the fetters, the chains, the ropes, the ties, to getting off of this hamster wheel. You're firmly staying in that hamster wheel in heaven or in hell. It may be great to be in heaven, but even harder to step out of that hamster wheel where there is no suffering. So this is why beings are said to be in the heavenly realms for so very long in time that we cannot imagine, before finding a way out. In the animal realms, you're just maybe another ant. It's very difficult to really make a decision about what will happen. The best thing that can happen is, as a result of causes and consequences, you become an ant in a monastery where hopefully nobody's going to kill you. And if it's that you're killed by accidents, it is such that the causes and conditions will hopefully give you a better rebirth in the next life. Maybe you'll become a mouse in a monastery, or a rat, or a dog or a cat. Maybe a monk one day. We don't know. But what we do know is what we can see, hear, smell, taste and touch in this lifetime with these physical bodies and thinking brains is enjoyable or not enjoyable, but what knows what is enjoyable and not enjoyable is unaffected, other than by its ties to the karmic consequences and causes from your actions of body, speech and mind. So by keeping sila, keeping moral virtue, then we are ensuring we only do good and therefore receive good back. And it's getting dark, so I might have to continue this one tomorrow with hopefully the light on. Many apologies for that. Hopefully you were just eyes closed listening. And yes, so this is really, I began by saying, becoming free from suffering in this lifetime. And yes, this alludes to the highest aspiration of attaining to Nibbāna. And Nibbāna is described in so many ways, but it is not describable, because it is not part of the conditioned world that we understand, or samsara. So it is not comparable. It doesn't have time. It doesn't have a location. It isn't even like a heaven or a hell, which to some extent have some, they are part of samsara and have some aspect of beings being there. They're not location-less, albeit they're not in a specific geographical place. Nibbāna is pure conscious awareness in pure spaciousness. Not air, not the sky, because that is to some extent gas. Well, it is not to some extent, it is gas. But in the gas molecules there is space, where there's nothingness. Not emptiness, just nothingness. There's nothing in there. And this is the space I'm talking about. And the citta abides in spaciousness. And when you lock your citta into an abiding with the Brahma Viharas, the home, the protective nature of the gods, the Brahmin, the Brahmas is the terminology used, but the fact is metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others, and upekkha, which is equanimity. When you lock your citta into those qualities. You don't practice, you can practice them, but you should develop them as qualities. Then your citta becomes imbued with those 4 Brahmaviharas, those 4 qualities. And therefore, with the delight, the pleasure, and the relief that you receive from those, which you can, after all, practice in everyday life: kindness, compassion, joy for others, and not overreacting to every situation, but being calm through the practice of meditation. You develop your citta skillfully, so skillfully it continues along this equanimous path until this body eventually has finished its time. And then, having reduced desires, become disenchanted, it's called Nibbāna, disenchantment, with what we used to enjoy. Because I found in my experiences of leaving the monastery and stepping away from meditation into worldly life and pleasures, I could no longer find any pleasure in what I knew already to be trying to satisfy insatiable desires, quench unquenchable thirsts. I could only see toil and torment and work in those activities of body, speech and mind, so became naturally disenchanted from them. This is the process of seeing through these stages of enlightenment towards Nibbāna, step by step, your own personal development, which cannot be easily measured but can be seen and witnessed from the point of view of here and now, when you just look a little bit into the past of how you were before you began this practice. And this is how we begin to become free from suffering in this lifetime, and therefore, if reborn into the next chapter, a little freer from suffering in that lifetime, with a better foundation to begin with. The pages have started to become a little bit looser as you thumb through the book, if you go in that direction. If you continue down the route of trying to satisfy all desires heedlessly, so without sila, without caring about your moral virtues, and without meditation, and without developing wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states, but all of the opposite, you tighten yourself into those pages, you tighten those chains and bindings and fetters. You become a firmer, stricter, more aggressive, more evil slave master to your own imprisonment of slavery to those needs. And this is the spiraling disaster that you see in all addicts. People addicted to drugs or alcohol, or even sex, or things of this nature, or even just food, and getting fatter and fatter. How does it end? In the hell realms, doesn't it? Even in this lifetime, they are in a living hell. And in the opposite sense, the people who take a very annihilation point of view and torture themselves through starvation and no pleasure whatsoever. It doesn't work either. The Buddha taught the middle path, in that there's no good being a martyr and suffering all kinds of things, thinking this will send you to heaven. It will just send you, with the results of those causes and conditions, into the next rebirth, another martyr. You need to find a balance. And it isn't something to look hard for. It's already there. We are born pure, We're born needing so very little. Just some food, warmth, some wrapped up, they'll wrap you, give you some food and air as a baby. All the rest we pick up along the way. And of course, the direction we go in, some we have brought with us. You could say genetically, but not really. Are you just like your mum and your dad? Maybe physically you might look like them. Do you have the same aspirations? Do you do the same job? Some people do, yes. But most people don't. There's no way my dad would be a monk living here. Or my mother. Or my grandparents. It's not genetic, no. I think time's gone on. It got dark when I turned the light on. So this is yet another too long video. But I hope there's something useful in there, and I'll continue this in the next video, maybe the next few videos really, this theme, which started out along the lines of basic Buddhism, which is advanced Buddhism. But you may be thinking this is a little bit advanced, but it's not really, it's very basic. I've used no Pali words, no reference to any suttas or scriptures, no Abhidharma. Because it's about real life, and it's about applying the Buddha's teachings to your real life. Whether it's real or whether it's not real, it doesn't matter. It's what you're experiencing at this very moment, here and now. Applying those teachings to that, just that. And then hopefully improving the causes and conditions for the next moment, so that each moment, from moment to moment, only improves. And if that means there is rebirth, and the next life is better than this, even if you've had a wonderful life this time, and you are having a wonderful life now, there is suffering. This is the primary and first teaching of the Buddha. But there is an end to suffering. So on that note, I shall leave it. Once again, apologies for the darkness. I hope it was at least some way visible. And thank you for watching.